Elena swung round and ran out without waiting to hear the rest of the story. On December 15, according to the calendar, the sun sets at 3:30 in the afternoon, so by 3 o'clock twilight began to settle on the apartment. But at that hour the hands on Elena's face were showing the most depressed and hopeless time on the human clock face, 5:30. The hands of the clock were formed by two sad folds at the corners of her mouth which were drawn down towards her chin, whilst in her eyes, depression and resolution had begun their struggle against disaster. Nikolka's face showed a jagged, wavering 20-1, because Nikolka's head was full of chaos and confusion evoked by the significant enigmatic words, Malaprovalnaya, words spoken by the dying man in the fighting at the crossroads yesterday, words which somehow had to be deciphered no later than the next few days. The chaos and difficulties had also been evoked by the puzzling and interesting figure of Lariusik falling from the sky into the Turbin's life and by the fact that a monstrous, grand event had befallen them. Petliura had captured the city. Petliura, of all people, and the city, of all places. And what would happen in it now was incomprehensible and inconceivable even to the most intelligent of human minds. One thing was quite clear: yesterday saw the most appalling catastrophe. All our forces were thoroughly beaten, caught with their pants down. Their blood shrieks to heaven, that is one thing. Those criminals, the generals, and the swine at headquarters deserve to be killed, that is another. But as well as sickening horror, a burning interest grew in Nikolka's mind. What, after all, is going to happen? How are 700,000 people going to live in a city in the power of an enigmatic personality with such a terrible, ugly name, Petliura? Who is he? Why is he here? Hell, though, all that takes second place for the moment in comparison with the most important thing, Alexei's bloody wound. Horrible, horrible business. Nothing is known for sure, of course, but in all probability Myshlayevsky and Karas can be counted as dead too. On the slippery, greasy kitchen table Nikolka was crushing ice with a broad-bladed hatchet. The lumps of ice either split with a crunch or slithered out from under the hatchet and jumped all over the kitchen, whilst Nikolka's fingers grew numb. Nearby was an ice bag with a silvery cap. Malo. Pruvalnaya, Nikolka mouthed silently, and across his mind's eye passed the images of Nai Turs, of the red-haired janitor, and of Myshlaevsky. And just as the image of Myshlaevsky, in his slashed greatcoat, had entered Nikolka's thoughts, the clock on the face of Anyuta, busy at the stove with her sad, confused dreams, pointed ever more clearly to 20 to 5, the hour of sorrow and depression. Were his different-colored eyes still alive and safe? Would she hear his broad stride again, the clinking sound of his spurs? "Bring the ice," said Elena, opening the door into the kitchen. "Right away," said Nikolka hurriedly, screwing up the cap, and running out. "Anyuta, my dear," said Elena. "Make sure you don't say a word to anyone about Alexei Vasilyevich being wounded." "If they find out, God forbid, that he was fighting against them, there'll be trouble." "I understand, Elena Vasilyevna. Of course I won't tell anyone." Anyuta looked at Elena with wide, anxious eyes. "Mother of God, the things that are happening in town." "I was walking down the street today and there were 2 dead men without boots, and blood everywhere. People were standing around and looking. Someone said the 2 dead men were officers. They were just lying there, no hats on their heads or anything. I felt my legs go all weak and I just ran away, nearly dropped my basket." Anyuta hunched her shoulders as though from cold as she remembered something else, and immediately a frying pan slid sideways out of her hands onto the floor. "Quiet, please, for God's sake," said Elena, wringing her hands. At 3 o'clock that afternoon the hands on Lariusik's face were pointing to the zenith of strength and high spirits, 12 o'clock. Both hands overlapped at noon, sticking together and pointing upwards like 2 sharp sword blades. This had come about because after the catastrophe which had shattered Lariusik's tender soul in Zhytomyr, after his terrible 11-day journey in a hospital train and after so many violent sensations, Lariusik liked it very much indeed at the turbines. He could not yet have told them why he liked it, because he had not so far properly explained it to himself. The beautiful Elena seemed a person deserving of unusual respect and attention. And he liked Nikolka very much too. As a way of showing this, Laryusik chose the moment when Nikolka had stopped dashing in and out of Alexei's room, and began to help him set up the folding steel bed in the library. You have the sort of frank expression which makes people trust you, Laryusik said politely, and stared so hard at that frank expression that he did not notice that he had caused the complicated, creaking bed to snap shut and crush Nikolka's arm between the two halves of the frame. The pain was so violent that Nikolka gave a yell which, although muffled, was so powerful that it brought Elena rushing into the room. Although Nikolka exerted all his strength to stop himself from howling, great tears burst spontaneously from his eyes. Elena and Laryusik both gripped the patent folding bed and tugged long and hard at it from opposite sides until they released Nikolka's wrist, which had turned blue. Laryusik almost burst into tears himself when the crushed arm came out limp and mottled. "Oh my God!" he said, his already miserable face grimacing even harder. "What's the matter with me?" "Everything I touch goes wrong." "Does it hurt terribly?" "Please forgive me, for God's sake." Without a word, Nikolka rushed into the kitchen, where at his instructions Anyuta ran a stream of cold water from the tap over his wrist. By the time the diabolical patent bed had been prized apart and straightened out and it was clear that Nikolka had suffered no great damage to his arm, Laryusik was once more overcome by a delightful sense of quiet joy at being surrounded by so many books. Besides his passion and love for birds, he also had a passion for books. Here, on open shelves that lined the room from floor to ceiling, was a treasure house. In green and red gold tooled bindings, in yellow dust covers and black slip cases, books stared out at Laryusik from all four walls.